So today we're going to talk about the power of habits. I was searching for what made sense to talk about today and what's been my experience over the last couple of weeks, but also what would be valuable for you and how we could leverage the power of the habit. Habits allow us to live without being conscious of every single action. And it's interesting when you get out of habits or when you change your routine, how real that becomes. How much we realize that those habits and those routine allow us to make better decisions. They allow us to feel more calm. They allow us to move through our life without feeling overwhelmed. And interestingly enough, the last couple of weeks, moving halfway across the country, I left the fabulous Denver, Colorado, and moved to a small town in South Carolina, very close to Charlotte, which is in North Carolina, if you look at the map. And moving across the country in the middle of a pandemic and having jobs being moved around and shifted and a new environment and new people, new grocery stores, new roads, all of this made me realize how much my routine helps me stay on track. It helps me keep things going. And so I thought, all right, let's talk about that today. Let's talk about the power of the habit and routines and how we can build those. Because it's not about doing it in the sense of just going and doing it. It's actually something we can create on our own, is that habit. Let's think about it this way. How often do you think about brushing your teeth or maybe making a cup of coffee or taking a shower or getting ready for your day? All of these things are habits, and these things become automatic. Think about it this way. I always make coffee the night before. When I get up in the morning, that's the first thing I do, is I get up and have some coffee. It's a habit. After I'm done eating breakfast, I brush my teeth. Someplace in there, I take a shower. Now, interestingly enough, these are habits that we don't think about. These are habits that have just become routine. Now, if we didn't have habits, it would be hard to get much done during the day. And interestingly enough, that's been a struggle for me for the last couple of weeks, is not just the week that we drove across the country, but the week after, and then even into this week, of recreating that routine and those habits so that I can get some things done, so I can be productive. Every time we do something for the first time, our brain has to be fully engaged in what we're doing. Fully engaged. And by forming a habit, that allows us to conserve that energy. And it allows us to use that energy elsewhere. So we don't have to take that full brain power once we have a habit. We don't have to take that full brain power to make those little decisions like brushing your teeth, like where is my toothbrush if you've moved. When a habit emerges, once it becomes habit, and we've heard 28 days, we're going to talk about how to do it a little bit faster. But once a habit emerges, then the brain stops participating fully in that decision making, which can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing if you've created some bad habits. We're going to talk about how to break those or reset those as well. So why are habits important? We talked about their importance so that we can go about our daily lives, so we can have a routine. And they're also powerful because they create those neurological cravings. And those neurological cravings are those pleasure chemicals that we get that tell us, hey, you did a great job, or hey, I just did something productive. And so habits really reinforce those. So how do habits work? We talked a little bit about the brain chemistry that they create, but how do they work? And then how do we create those habits? Charles Duhigg, and I'm probably mispronouncing this, he wrote the book, The Power of the Habit. And I'm going to put these in the comments after I'm done with Facebook Live, so you can find these books. Love these books, read both of them, think they're fascinating. So Charles talks about a habit loop and creating that habit loop. And habit loop is our feedback. Starts with our feedback, which is your trigger, it's your routine, it's your reward. So this is our feedback loop. Our first feedback is our cue or our trigger. This can be a location, it can be a time of day, it can be certain people, it can be an emotional routine. I mentioned this morning about one of my habits I always have is I get up in the morning and have coffee first thing. So that's a habit. Don't have to think about it. It just happens. Now, being in a new state, I had to recreate some habits and I'm working on that. Didn't do Facebook Live for a couple weeks because the habit dropped off. So we have this cue, we have a time, we have a day, we have an emotional response. All of these are cues. Second part of this is the routine. What happens when that cue happens? Maybe it's watching TV. Maybe at 5 o'clock you sit down and start watching TV, or 7 a.m. you watch the news as you're drinking coffee. Maybe it's smoking a cigarette. Hopefully not. Eating chocolate. I'm all about eating chocolate. Maybe it's biting your nails. All of these things are habits that we're not thinking about anymore. We're not actively thinking, oh, well, I do this. When I do this, when I have this emotional response, this is when I eat chocolate. Or when it's 5 p.m., I sit down and watch the news. So the final part of this feedback loop is the reward. These are the pleasure chemicals that are released in the brain because of the routine. Now, this becomes completely unconscious. So what happens is we have that trigger, we have that our cue, we have our routine, what we do when that cue happens, and then we have the reward. Oh, I did this thing. Maybe eating chocolate makes you feel good. Maybe sitting down and having your coffee in the morning helps you wake up. Maybe smoking that cigarette helps calm your nerves. Heart could be any one of these things. Here's the thing is habits never disappear. They never disappear. If you want to change a habit, you have to replace it with a different habit. Different habit. So they're never going to disappear. When we're replacing one habit with another, a great place to start is to use the same cue. Maybe it's getting up in the morning and I decide instead of coffee, I want to drink tea. So I've replaced it with a different cue. Getting up in the morning is still the cue. I'm using the same cue, but I'm changing the habit. So you change the routine. What happens then? What happens next when that cue happens? Third is you provide the same reward. What is the same reward? Okay, I got up in the morning, I'm gonna have some coffee. Oh, I'm gonna have tea instead, changing that habit. My reward is I'm waking up. Okay, great. My reward is I've started my day the same way I start my day, puts me in the right attitude and the right mood. So let's talk about this with exercise. Two things people love to talk about, don't want to do: exercise and eat right. Am I right? Now, if we want to change when we exercise, maybe I want to connect this to my morning cue. All right, I get up and I drink coffee. All right, after I'm done with my coffee and I watch the 7 a.m. news, I'm going to exercise for half an hour. Okay, change the routine. That's where the change is. My trigger is getting up in the morning and having coffee. All right, next thing I'm going to change, instead of going and taking a shower or doing something, getting on the computer, we're looking at Facebook, I'm going to exercise. Then I have the same reward at the end. I completed my habit. As we continue to do this, it then creates the habit. But we have to have that reward there. Now, the second author we're going to talk about is BJ Fogg, and he wrote the book called Tiny Habits, Small Changes That Change Everything. Now, if you struggled with changing your habits, maybe you want to exercise more, eat healthier, quit smoking, any of these, anything, I highly recommend BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits. Great book, talks about how you can do this. Tiny habits are like, and creating habits is like growing a plant. You start with something small, just like a plant, maybe a seed, maybe a little sprout. Then you find a good spot in your garden, proper soil, good light, good water, and then you nourish your plant until those roots get established. Now we continue to nourish the plant afterwards, just like our habits. We have to spend a little bit more time nourishing it at the beginning to get that plant to flourish. Plants, habits, just like each other. So building a new habit, start with a tiny behavior. One of the things BJ Fogg talks about is brushing your teeth and flossing. So if you don't floss your teeth on a regular basis and you want to start with one tooth. Here's your tiny habit. One tooth. So if you start with one tooth, all right, we've connected this to brushing your teeth. You always brush your teeth. You already have that habit established. All right, let's attach those together. Let's create that anchor. And then you're going to floss one tooth. Okay, once you get comfortable with flossing one tooth, that becomes habit. You don't have to think about it. Start flossing 2 teeth, and then 3, and then 4, and eventually you will floss all of your teeth. This is how we create tiny habits. So you start with one small behavior. Maybe it's exercise. You say, all right, I haven't exercised in a while. I'm going to start with 5 minutes. All right, 5 minutes and I'm done. That's all I have to do. If I want to do more, great. If I don't, that's okay too. Then you find a good spot for your daily routine and your tiny habit. So this is a way to connect those two together. What is something you already do that's already part of your routine that you can attach this new habit to? I have a gentleman that I worked with a couple months ago. And one of the things we talked about is he's like, I really want to get out and exercise a little bit more. He says, but I just don't have time. And I said, okay, what happens? And he walked me through his day. He says, when I get home in the evening, then I want to go walk the dogs, but a lot of times I just don't. I'll just let them out in the backyard. And I said, all right, what would happen if instead of coming home and taking off your shoes, if you had the leash sitting at the front door, you put your things down, you get the dogs, and then you go for a short walk. He said, oh, I could do that. He said, because once I sit down and get relaxed, I don't want to do anything. Completely understand. So connect it to something else you're already doing. Once you've created this anchor with a habit you're already doing or routine, you nourish this behavior until it gets firmly established. So maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 2 minutes, but you start with one push-up, right? Walking your dog around the park, half a block. Start creating that tiny habit. Why do we start tiny? Why do we start tiny? We've all heard creating a habit takes 28 days. Okay. What happens if you miss a day? I don't know about you guys, but I lose my motivation. If I miss a day or something doesn't happen in the right way, I got to start all over. All right. So difficult behaviors require a high level of motivation. Difficult behaviors require a high level of motivation. Now, this motivation is coming from you. So if you need a high level of motivation, chances you're not going to incorporate these habits or change these behaviors. Now, the motivation for any behavior goes up and down over time. It's going to happen. Exercise, perfect example. Some days you're going to feel great. Maybe you have a couple months that you exercise regularly, and then it drops off. Your routine changes. Oh, my schedule changed at work, or I started dating someone, or something else happened that upset your routine, and now it's no longer a habit. So those are hard to maintain over time. Now, relying exclusively on motivation doesn't work. It doesn't work, guys. It just doesn't work. So don't worry about the motivation. Let's worry about creating those habits. So an example of motivation is exercising and eating more vegetables. I'm motivated to do it, but that doesn't always mean that I'm going to do it, because that motivation goes up and down. When the behavior is easy, we don't have to rely on motivation to complete it. So the key to those tiny habits and the power of the habit is simplicity. Make it small. Create a tiny habit. Floss one tooth. Do 2 push-ups or 1 push-up. Change your morning routine slightly, but anchor it to something else that you're already comfortable with. You're already doing without thinking about it. That's how we create those tiny habits. I'm going to leave you with this today. Tiny habits are the way to go. The power of the habit can allow us to live our lives more fully, to be more satisfied with what we have, and to be able to change some of those habits that we all struggle with. We all have them. To be able to change those habits, one tiny habit at a time.